Welcome to the deep dive. If you've been feeling just this immense pressure in the housing market lately, whether you rent or you own, well, there's this one metric that really explains why everything feels so, I don't know, fundamentally broken.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking today about a massive shift, really, in the rent-to-ownership ratio.
Yeah. And this ratio, it's maybe the clearest signal we have about let's say, the health of the American housing system. And it's pointing to a crisis that's escalated incredibly quickly.
It really has. Because historically, for almost 50 years, right? From the 70s basically up until just a few years ago.
Yeah, 1973 to 2022, pretty much.
This ratio was stable. It stayed right around 1 to 1.
Exactly, 1 to 1.
Just think about that for a moment. For like 2 whole generations, the monthly cost of owning a home, your mortgage, interest, taxes, insurance, all that,
PITI.
was roughly the same cost as renting a similar place.
Yeah.
That 1-to-1 balance was sort of the quiet bedrock of the American dream, wasn't it?
It really was. It meant you could choose that stability, you could build equity without facing this huge immediate jump in your monthly bills.
But that world, it's just gone.
Yeah.
Today, the reality is totally different. The cost of owning has completely detached from the cost of renting.
Absolutely detached. We're now looking at a premium for owning that's nearly 3 times higher. It costs 2.8 times more to own than to rent right now.
2.8 times. I mean, that number is just staggering when you think about the history.
It is.
So our mission today is really to dig into that 2.8x figure. We need to explore what specifically caused this, why it happened so fast, this extreme imbalance, and crucially, figure out what this huge gap means for you, the listener, and how it's pretty much forcing this inevitable and probably painful recalibration of rents everywhere.
Well, when you look back, that stability is quite remarkable. 50 years where owning and renting were financially pretty similar.
Yeah. People chose to own for other reasons, right?
Yeah.
Like the pride, the permanence, maybe having yard.
Sure, the intangibles. But the math wasn't, punishing you for making that choice. And then almost in the blink of an eye, the math just completely broke.
And the speed is what gets me. This wasn't some slow, gradual slide over a decade.
No, not at all.
The source material calls it a jolt, which feels right. It happened basically between 2020 and 2022. Like someone flipped a switch.
Yeah, like a spring-loaded trap or something. And that mechanism, it had 2 main parts sort of working together, driving this change.
Okay, what was the first part?
The first was the COVID frenzy. Remember that? Suddenly, everyone's stuck at home, maybe in smaller apartments.
Staring at the same 4 walls, yeah.
Exactly. And they realized, maybe desperately, that they needed more space, more privacy. The appeal of apartment living just kind of cratered for a lot of people almost overnight.
And that kicked off this incredible rush into the housing market. It wasn't just like a little bump in demand. It felt more psychological.
Oh, definitely. Zillow, Realtor.com. They basically turned into these national obsessions like shopping sprees. People were bidding crazy amounts, sometimes sight unseen.
Yeah, waiving inspections. It was wild.
And it just drove prices up so dramatically, so fast.
And we saw the impact, right? Home prices nationally jumped by, what, about a third?
Roughly a third, yeah. The average price went from hovering around $300,000 to suddenly being closer to $400,000. It felt almost instantaneous.
Wow, so if you wanted that extra bedroom, that yard, suddenly you were paying this massive premium that just hadn't existed before.
Precisely. And then came the second gear, the one that really made the affordability crisis just explode.
The Fed's response.
The Fed's response to inflation, yeah. They hit the brakes hard, and interest rates shot up faster than we'd seen in, 40 years?
40 years. So you've got this 30% jump in the actual price tag, plus mortgage rates doubling, going from maybe 3% up to 6 or 7%.
And that is the core math behind the 2.8x ratio. It's that combination. The price shock just needing way more money up front, and the debt shock, the huge increase in the cost of borrowing that money.
The dual pressure.
That's why ownership costs just soared completely out of reach for so many typical renters who might have been thinking about making that leap.
Okay, so we've laid out the pretty painful reality of this 2.8x ratio. The big question now is, can it fix itself? Can we get back to that stable 1-to-1 world we had for 50 years?
Well, looking at the underlying factors, the structural things the sources point to, the short answer is probably tough. It's not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon. Why not? What's locking this in?
There seem to be three really powerful forces keeping this new high ratio kind of stuck in place.
Okay, let's take it one by one. What's the first?
Factor one is basically a supply block, created largely by the older generation, the baby boomers. We're seeing this big cultural shift where they're choosing to age in place.
Staying in their homes longer.
Much longer than previous generations did. They often have these great low-interest mortgages paid way down or paid off entirely. Their property taxes might be locked in low. Frankly, why would they move?
From their perspective, it makes total sense, right? Why trade a 3% mortgage and maybe, I don't know, $3,000 a year in property tax for a new place with a 7% mortgage and a much higher tax bill, even if it's smaller?
Exactly. It's rational for them. But the effect is they're locking up a huge chunk of the existing single-family home inventory, the very homes that younger families traditionally relied on to enter the market.
So the supply of existing homes, especially affordable ones, is just really tight, which keeps prices high for whatever does come on the market.
Precisely. Severely constrained.
Okay, so if the existing inventory is kind of stuck, what about building new homes? Can builders just ramp up and flood the market with new supply to fix this?
Well, they're running into their own kind of economic wall. And that's factor two. The basic cost of building is just incredibly high now.
How high are we talking?
The sources highlight that the average cost for just a developed residential lot, just the land with utilities ready, is now around $100,000 in America.
$100,000 just for the lot, before you even pour concrete.
Before you frame a single wall, yeah. And a lot of that comes down to, restrictive zoning, expensive infrastructure requirements that cities put on builders, lengthy and costly approval processes. It all adds up.
And if you're starting with a $100,000 land cost,
you're immediately pushed towards building a more expensive home, right?
Yeah.
A larger home, higher end finishes, just to make the numbers work on that initial land investment.
so new construction automatically lands in that $400,000 plus territory. You just can't build truly entry-level affordable homes when the starting point is that expensive.
Pretty much. The floor is too high.
Okay, so existing supply is blocked, new supply is expensive. Which brings us to the third factor. You called it the interest rate paradox.
Yeah, this is sort of the cyclical trap that keeps things locked. Let's say the Fed does manage to bring interest rates down a bit. Maybe mortgages drop to, say, 5.5% or 6%.
Okay, what happens then?
Well, all those potential buyers who've been sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to drop, they jump back in, right?
Suddenly there's a rush of demand again.
Exactly. And that surge of demand instantly pushes home prices up again. So even if the monthly mortgage payment drops a little because of the rate, the overall price you pay goes up, keeping the total cost of ownership elevated.
It's a catch-22. Lower rates bring buyers, buyers drive up prices, higher prices keep the ownership cost high, which just reinforces that 2.8 ratio.
It becomes this self-perpetuating cycle it's really hard to break out of.
Okay, so if owning is structurally stuck at almost 3 times the cost of renting, that massive gap, that 2.8 number, it has to be sending some kind of powerful signal to the rental market, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's sending a profound signal.
What's the signal?
It's basically screaming that rental rates are fundamentally too low compared to the actual cost of providing that housing, the cost of ownership. The market just can't sustain a situation long term where owning the asset is 3 times more expensive than using it, than renting it.
So the cheaper side has to adjust upwards.
Mathematically, yes. Renting has to recalibrate upwards to meet the reality of ownership costs.
Now, that's a really critical point for our listeners who are renting right now, because we're not just talking about your standard, 3% or 4% annual rent increase anymore.
No, this is different. Analysts are looking at this 2.8x premium as like a justification or a runway for potentially huge adjustments in rent.
Oh, huge.
Well, we're seeing some pretty bold predictions out there. Prominent analysts like Grant Cardone, for example, are suggesting apartment rents might need to rise by, say, 50%, even up to 100%.
Wait, double. A 100% increase in rent.
Just to start aligning with this new cost reality that the 2.8 ratio implies, it's not just normal inflation, it's the market trying to correct this huge imbalance between owning and renting.
But hang on. If rents actually doubled, wouldn't that cause, a massive social upheaval, political backlash, rent controls? Can the market actually bear that kind of increase?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? That's the real tension here. The economic pressure for rents to rise is intense because the underlying cost of the asset, building it, financing it, has gone up so much.
Right.
But how fast rents can actually rise will absolutely be tested against what people can afford and what becomes politically acceptable. Landlords will push, though, because the math tells them the rents are currently undervalued relative to costs. If they can't get rents up, it actually signals a problem for the value of their buildings.
It's a tough spot. And this upward pressure, it doesn't just stop at apartments, does it? It must ripple down through every type of housing.
Absolutely. It moves down the chain.
Yeah.
Think about mobile home park lot rents, for instance. They tend to follow apartment rent trends maybe a bit more slowly, like the quiet kid following the bigger siblings, as the source material puts it.
Okay. So that sector, which is a huge slice of affordable housing.
It's primed for potentially big adjustments, too. And the current numbers really highlight the gap.
What do those look like?
Well, if the average apartment rent nationally is getting close to, say, $2,000 a month,
Okay.
while the average mobile home lot, just the rent for the patch of ground your home sits on, is still down around $300, maybe $400 a month.
Wow, that's a huge difference, over $1,600.
Exactly. That massive gap basically screams opportunity to investors in that mobile home park space. It shows just how far behind that segment of the rental market is in this whole recalibration process.
So major adjustments are likely coming there too.
It seems almost inevitable. If apartment rents continue to climb, that $1,600 gap provides a huge incentive for lot rents to follow suit, which will seriously test the affordability of even that sector.
So as this whole housing market structure shifts, it feels important to be clear about who's actually benefiting from this new entrenched 2.8x reality and who's, well, bearing the brunt of it.
Yeah, I think we can identify them pretty clearly. The winners, pretty unambiguously, are the owners of rental properties.
Landlords?
Landlords, yeah. Owners of apartment buildings, owners of mobile home parks, investors with portfolios of single-family homes they rent out. They're all positioned for potentially significant increases in their rental income.
Because the market is essentially forcing rents upward towards that higher ownership cost benchmark?
Exactly. Their potential cash flow looks set to increase quite a bit as this recalibration plays out.
Okay, so those are the winners. Who are the losers in this scenario?
Well, conversely, the losers are, unfortunately, the renters. They're the ones effectively shouldering the burden of this massive adjustment.
Facing rapidly rising housing costs.
Rapidly rising costs, yeah, with seemingly very little immediate relief in sight. The structural changes we've talked about, high building costs, locked up supply, aren't easily fixed by short-term policies. Affordability is just contracting severely.
And what does this say about policy? Did policymakers just miss this?
Well, the analysis kind of suggests that, yeah, policymakers maybe missed the critical window to intervene effectively when this ratio first started to break apart so quickly.
Focused maybe too much on short-term fixes instead of the bigger picture.
Perhaps. Allowing the imbalance to grow unchecked, without really tackling the underlying structural issues. You know, if the fundamental cost to build a new housing unit starts at $400,000 because of land and construction costs.
Right, that $100K lot cost.
Then many current affordable housing initiatives, while well-intentioned, might just be nibbling around the edges. They're trying to bridge a gap that has become enormous. It's like treating a symptom, maybe, while the underlying disease, the high structural cost, remains.
So the tough conclusion is,
the hard truth seems to be that we're left with a housing market that is just dramatically more expensive and significantly less accessible than it was just a few years ago. And the basic math suggests the rental market is marching towards new highs, almost regardless of the political desire for affordability. #tag outro.
So wrapping this up, our deep dive into this 2.8x rent-to-ownership ratio really confirms that the stability we saw for, 50 years, it's truly gone.
Yeah, seems that way.
We're living through this massive, sometimes kind of violent recalibration of what average Americans can expect to pay for shelter. The market doesn't seem to be heading back to that old normal.
No.
Yeah.
And that ratio, that 2.8 number, it really acts as this incredibly clear signal about where things are likely headed. If owning stays close to 3 times more expensive than renting, and it seems locked in for a while,
Yeah.
it forces us to really question some fundamental ideas, doesn't it? Like, what does the American dream even mean in that context? What happens to the value we placed on permanence, on stability, on pride of ownership, when the pure financial logic for stability has been turned completely upside down?
That's a powerful point. If renting becomes the significantly cheaper, more financially rational choice, at least in the short to medium term, how does that reshape everything? Long-term financial planning, wealth accumulation for a whole generation, how society defines stability itself?
It suggests some pretty fundamental shifts might be underway,
Yeah.
far beyond just the housing market itself. Definitely something big to think about as we all adjust to this new reality.
Absolutely. A lot to ponder there. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.